Dr. John Lawson is a paediatric neurologist and TSC clinic co-director at Sydney Children's Hospital in Randwick, New South Wales. He is also one of TSA's medical advisors. John has recently been part of an international research team conducting a trial looking at the potential benefits of add-on CBD treatment for drug-resistant seizures in TSC. John joins me today to discuss the trial and its outcomes. Thanks for joining us, John. First off, can you tell us a bit about the study and what it involved?
Yep, sure, Jackie. Thank you for inviting me to talk about it. And I think the study we're going to talk about is a recently published study about the use of a type of cannabis for children with people with TSC who also have epilepsy. It was a worldwide study, and it involved about 40 different sites across the world. And there were 4 Australian sites. There was one purely paediatric one, which was ours at Randwick. But there was 2 sites in Melbourne and one in Brisbane as well that all contributed patients. So Australian TSC families really, we were the biggest, one of the biggest recruiters in the world. Australia contributed a lot to this, and that really, that's not, I'm not taking credit for that. It is that our TSC families who donated their very valuable time and and risk being part of this. So, but it's a great outcome.
And so, what did you do in the study?
Yeah, so basically we took people from 2 years of age up until 65 years of age. And we gave them, so they had to have tuberous sclerosis, and they also had to have pretty bad epilepsy. So they would have, most of them had failed 4 or 5 drugs at least in the past. And to qualify for the study, you have to have a number of seizures per week. So on average, they would have to have, at least 1 to 2 seizures per week. And then once they agree to go into the trial, a whole lot of blood tests and questionnaires and teaching about what to do. And then this is the really tough part for families, is that it's what's called a placebo-controlled trial. And that is a really big challenge for people, because what it meant was that 2 out of every 3 people who got enrolled, 2 out of 3 got the cannabis drug, and 1 out of 3 just got a sugar pill, and nobody knows. So I didn't know what they were getting, and the families didn't know what they were getting, and that, you can imagine, Jackie, how hard that could be. Wondering whether you're the lucky one or not. The good news was that then what happens is that we follow for 3 months, and this is where the burden of this also falls very heavily on the families, particularly those from rural areas. We had a family from sort of beyond the dividing range and from Canberra, and we had a couple, a family from I won't name the towns because it might identify them, but certainly that big towns, on the other side of the dividing range, and they had to travel down, and they would have to come down with their disabled, autistic fitting children up to every 2 weeks, and traveling for 4 hours or so. So for 3 months we watch them, and the families have to count seizures every day, and that's all put onto a computer. And at the end of the 3 months, everybody got the drug, which is really the only way that you would go in this trial. So at the end of that 3 months, you could elect to receive the medicine, no matter whether you thought there was benefit or not, and not knowing whether you'd had it. And so that's what happened. And again, on the way, we had 12 families involved at Randwick, and some of them had some side effects. So they had problems with their liver, and we had another, and one of those children, in fact, and it seemed to be working very well, and they got the problem and had to go out of the trial. So they were seeing a wonderful change, but then their liver reacted to the medicine, that was heartbreaking because they saw things improving and then they had to stop because of a reaction to the drug. So in the 3 months, all that, this is sort of happens over, across the world over a couple of years. And so it takes all that time. You might be there on day one, but you won't know until 2 years later whether there's any benefit, whether the medicine works or not. And the good thing about these trials also is that those people who could see they were having benefit could continue, for free. They were provided, and that still happened. This now is about 4 years ago, and the majority of those patients are still getting free medicine from the company. So 2 years, 2 years down the track, essentially, the data is analysed, and it showed that there was quite a significant benefit for those who got the cannabis product versus those who got the sugar pills. And several of those people were seizure-free. Just overall, the numbers are about 5% became seizure-free, but a much bigger number, about 2/3 of them got at least a 50% reduction in their seizures. So, if they're having 100 seizures a month on the cannabidiol, they were having, on average, they were having 50. That may not sound great because you're still having 50, but that's an average. So it means that some of those, say, might have only had a few, and whereas others might have had not such a great effect. So it's a real spectrum of benefit. And I'd say overall, about 20%, about 1 in 5 people with TSC who have this medicine see a very good benefit. Like, no one, it makes a big change for their lives. And about another 2/3, so we'll see some benefit, but it's not a miracle. It just helps a bit. It's just not magic. And about 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, or it doesn't do anything. And it's like taking water. It's really quite surprising sometimes how little impact it has, either positive or negative.
I understand that some of the people who took the sugar pill, i.e. the placebo, also benefited in terms of a reduction in their seizures. So what do you put that down to?
Oh, yes, that's a hard one. And it's a feature of all trials, really every placebo. It's the reason we have a placebo is in trials is because there is always a placebo effect, and it's also a particular feature of cannabis trials as well, because of all the hype. So there's so much information and misinformation out there that cannabis is perceived to be a miracle drug, and so if you think you're getting the miracle drug, yeah, you're going to do better. Yeah.
And you talked about the patient who had to drop out because of impacts on the liver.
Yep.
What other side effects did people in the trial experience?
Yeah, so the most serious one is the liver abnormalities, and that's very important to watch out for. Not that anyone's been injured yet by that, but that will happen if people misuse this medicine. The most common side effect that we saw in the trial was, in fact, no side effects. The majority of people did not have any sort of significant side effects. The next most common was being excessively sleepy, and that varied. And it's like any epilepsy drug, they can all make you a bit sleepy. That was often temporary, could improve by itself, or we had to adjust some of the other medicines. So we might drop the dose of another medicine to try and help that improve. The other main side effect was gastrointestinal, which means symptoms like feeling nauseous, not wanting to eat, and diarrhea. And that happened to about 1 in 10 people. And some people did lose weight, which can be a problem. And also feeling a bit sick, that's also a problem. It was rarely a major problem. Other other rare things you just have to be aware of. An allergic reaction, which can happen with any product, and probably not the cannabis. It's more to do with the oil that it comes in, a sesame oil, with this particular type of cannabis. And another really important one is a really important message is that it does interfere with many of the other epilepsy drugs. So you just have to be, so the message is not to stop those, but you've just got to be aware that it can push up the levels in your blood or decrease the levels. So it might make you, it might say push up clobazam is a famous one, frisium. So you might get really sleepy because the clobazam is pushed up. That's not to say you should stop those things, because you get in more trouble if you stop those drugs. But you just got to, doctor and person using it has to be aware of those issues. They're the big things. But otherwise, actually pretty good. What we don't know is long term. So we do know a lot about the evils of the evil weed, the evil cannabis, and the medication that we're using here is just a component of cannabis, and it's not the stuff that makes you high. That's called THC. What we're using is a product called CBD, or it's called cannabidiol. Cannabidiol does not make you high. It doesn't have those some of those negative things that you see with the THC, which is sometimes hallucinations, anxiety, and all those sorts of things.
John, I read recently in the Sydney Morning Herald about some over-the-counter CBD. How does that compare to what you were using within this study?
Yeah, so it is interesting. The product that we're using, the cannabidiol, has been developed by truly a pharmaceutical company. So a company that makes a drug to a very, very high standard. And, just like if you buy, a Moxil, you know that exactly what's in that. And a lot of testing and a lot of safety built into that when you get a pharmaceutical product. When you get, there's a huge industry of people that are basically cannabis producers. Many of those are approved by the government, but the quality of that product is nowhere near as good. It's generally safe, but it has not been heavily tested, and a whole lot of safety things missing. The over-the-counter one will be it is now into, it's been passed into law. To the opposition actually of medical experts. It's sort of bizarre. None of us can quite understand why it's happened, because it's being treated like Panadol essentially, except that it's restricted to over 18-year-olds. But I'm sure parents are going to just buy it and give it to their kids, so I can't see why they won't. It's a reasonable quality, but it is not. It's not a pharmaceutical. It's not a highly regulated safe product, and also that concerns me, because people don't, poor families, they don't know all the details, and their GP certainly doesn't know, and even this so-called experts, the cannabis access clinics and those sorts of things. They can be very junior doctors with very limited experience, just following a script, like just being taught a very narrow bit of information and don't really have the big picture. So I'm very cautious. I'd be very cautious about that, particularly for epilepsy.
So, John, for people in our community, individuals and parents of children out there who think, hey, this could really help me, what should they do? How can they get access to this? Can they get access to this yet?
Yeah, no, sure. So that's a very good question again. So only a couple of months ago, this drug, which is called, the brand name is called Epidiolex, and that was the medicine that was used in the tuberous sclerosis trials we were talking about, and it is it's been approved for a condition called Dravet syndrome, which is a very rare type of epilepsy, childhood epilepsy. Even if it's approved, it's still not actually available to them. They've still got to all the logistics and, which is very frustrating for families, but in a way that will pave the way. Once that's all set up, it makes the next steps much easier. The next groups that will be looking, it will be applying to the Australian regulatory groups, which is the TGA and the sort of PBS. The company will be applying to those groups to get approved for tuberous sclerosis. That, if that all goes as it should, then that means that drug should be available for use in about a year's time. And I hate promising because there's so many things that could happen, but it is most likely that will happen. In the interim, what can families do? They can pay for the drug if they are very rich, because the cost of the highest quality medicines for, say, a 20 or 30 kilo child is getting it into the $2,000 to $3,000 a month. So that's a huge impost on 99.9% of the population. So the alternatives to for those families who can't afford that, one option is that you just give it a go. Things that certainly I would say that it's not fantastically better than everything else. So you do need to go for your standard medicines that can work very, very well, and not free, but certainly won't cost that sort of amount. But if you have failed 4 or 5 of those medicines, then I think cannabidiol has got a role for people with TSC. And for those families, they could consider paying on a short-term basis. So saying, okay, we'll save up and hold a fundraiser and just pay for a couple of months, and that may be $5,000. I mean, it's not nothing. It might be $5,000 they have to pay. If it works very well, then they'll have to be onto their local MP and doing everything they can to try and get someone else to help them pay for it if it works well. If it doesn't work well, then at least that question is out of their mind, and that and then that money is gone, but they don't have to keep paying for that, and so look for other alternatives. So and so some families I see will that's what they will do. They'll ask granddad, can you give them a loan, or and that's hard for me because I don't want to push. I'm certainly not going to push people to do that, because it is it's big money for in anyone's book, and also if it works, then it's sort of a problem in a way, because you're stuck with a big bill. But yeah, so that is an option. One problem for the families is that not all doctors are this is a new area, and so most doctors haven't got a clue. So you have to sort of see someone who's got, and in each, in general, pediatric neurologists have the knowledge, or can speak to someone very easily about what to do. Adult neurology, a lot different, much harder. There are some epilepsy centers, adult epilepsy centers are getting experience with it, but still, the level, you have to see a neurologist who's an adult neurologist who's an epilepsy specialist to be able to try and move that forward. The other option is just to wait and hope it gets on the PBS next year, because then it will cost $10, $5 a script. Quite a difference from several thousand. Indeed.
Yeah. Anything else that our TSC community should know about the trial or of this particular drug, John?
No, look, I suppose the one thing to say, Jackie, is how just the American TSC population is a highly motivated group, and I think they're around the world. They're a huge population of people, and there's some people with enormous amounts of money, and it is a very different situation with Australia, but they're a great example that Australia is actually mirrored. So we've been involved in trials in TS now for about probably 10 years. And that means drugs like Afinitor, like everolimus, came to Australia and got into the PBS in the world, first in the world. And it's just because we had the first trial had one patient from Australia enrolled that we had, and that led to the drug being on the PBS. Amazing. And so we did trials in epilepsy and kidneys, and the TSA also helped fund a skin trial, and that this was still not super available, but certainly set up systems that make it available for more families. So the cannabis trials are the latest example of that. We know there's a lot still to work on for TSC. You know, we're not anywhere near the solving the incredible burden of this condition for those who have it and their families. And so I said to those families in this trial, you are helping not only, you're helping hundreds of thousands of people with TS across the world, and what an amazing thing, what an amazing sacrifice, and in fact helping people with epilepsy across the world too with the cannabis trials. So it's the involvement in clinical trials is a burden. It's risky, but it's the only way we learn, only way we move forward. And I thank those families again.
Yeah, we also thank those families, and we thank you, John, for both being part of the trial and sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you so much.
No worries, Jackie. Thank you.